Real quick, we're going to go through the installation procedures for DCPrint card issuance software for running the Datacard 150i, the Datacard 220, 275, 285, 295, 430, and the 450 embossing and card personalization systems. The software is going to be compatible with systems running Windows XP, Vista 7, 8, 8.1, or 10. Now, we do recommend that if you are going to install the DCPrint, first do all of the system updates. Run Windows Update until all of your updates are done, and then turn off your automatic updates. And just because sometimes updates will mess with software and somehow it will kill its activation and do things. We have version 2.35 and version 2.45. There's only one difference. Version 2.35 is built on the Microsoft.NET 3.5 framework, and version 2.45 is built on the Microsoft.NET framework 4.5. The code and the software, the functions and the features are identical other than that, but because we wanted to maintain broad compatibility so that you could run Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, 8, 8.1, or 10, and moving forward, when Microsoft decided to no longer support Windows XP and soon to be Vista, they stopped developing support or installer for the version 4.5 on Windows XP, so you could only take that up to version 4. What we have is the version 3.5, which will run on the Windows XP system and the Vista system and the 7 system. It will also run on 8, 8.1, and it will also run on 10. But the difference is it will require you most likely to download the .NET 3.5 framework, which is just going to be an additional step in time. So if you're running 8, 8.1, or 10, we do recommend going ahead and using the version 2.45, which will give you the same software, functions, and features, stability and compatibility overall, but you won't have to download anything. So let me go ahead real quick and show you what happens when I install a system that does not have the .NET 3.5 framework. Okay, so here's the installer, and on all of our installers it'll welcome you. It will show you that this is the DCPrint 150i version 2.35. Again, 3.35 is not a newer version than 0.245, other than it's a 4.5 is the newer .NET framework. So we're going to go ahead, hit next through this. We suggest you just leave everything on the defaults. It will go ahead and create desktop icons, quick launch icons. If you don't want those, you can turn them off, but we recommend just leaving it alone. Okay, at the end it's going to default with a checkbox here to start DCPrint, and I'm going to go ahead and do that so that we can show you what happens at that point. So I'm going to hit finish. Windows pulls this up and lets you know that it needs to install .NET Framework 3.5, and this does come from Microsoft, not from us, and wants your permission to download and install this feature. So if I click on this and install the feature, and I'll go ahead and do that, it's going to search, go to Windows Online. If you're connected to the internet, it's going to download the required files. You'll notice this is a Windows feature, so this is not anything that we are installing. This is Windows requiring to install the Microsoft.NET 3.5 framework. Alright, so it says the following feature was successfully installed. Now, if it says it was not successfully installed, you need to check your connection or take a look at what's going on with it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit close on this. And now that I have that feature, I can run the software. So I'll come up and double click the DCPrint icon. Instead of getting the required features, I now get the activation window. We do suggest that you first activate in demo. Okay, the reason you want to use demo first is to test the software on your computer to make sure that you get good connectivity and function to your data card. But once you go into the demo version, look right here, you'll see in the bottom right hand side that it does say demo version. First thing you got to do is go into your settings and tell it where to communicate with your computer, which is your COM port. Your COM port is what connects to the serial port. Now notice here I have no selections, and I did this on purpose so that you'd see I have not yet plugged in my USB to serial port, which I will do now. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to plug this in. Let me see here. So you'll see right now it's installing devices. and you may end up needing to have that disk that came with your USB adapter to go in and manually say, install the drivers for this USB device from this manufacturer disk, so you don't have to wait for this, or on occasion some brands will install generic drivers that don't work, and that's a big problem. Finish the installation of the driver, so it's done, so I do have it set up. And the way you'll know if it did or it didn't is you'll come into settings again, and all of a sudden there you go, voila, COM3 shows up. Something to understand is normally if you have a built-in serial port like on some of the laptops, you plug it right into the back of the system, and you don't have to do that. And it will usually come up like as a COM1. When you use a USB adapter, normally it'll be COM3, 4, 5, 6. So now what we need to do is generally you leave everything else alone. You don't need to adjust anything else, just tell it which COM port and hit save. Now there are sometimes, if you're not using the brand, the TrendNet brand that we recommended, is that these COM ports appear to be functioning, but then they're not really. Those generic drivers aren't working. So if I come back into settings and it's still there, and I don't have to select it again, but it still shows up. If I come back and this was blank again, then that means it did not save, which means that there's probably something wrong with that COM port or that adapter. But in this case, it worked, so that gives me a certain level of comfort. Down at the bottom left-hand side, you'll see status, and status is waiting for connection. Okay, so to look at the top left side, there's a connect button. So if we just connect like so, you'll see this little lightning sign on it, and since we have properly set the COM port in settings, we now have a status that says ready for Datacard command. Ready just means it now has an active connection and we can now send commands to it. The ideal reason for the demo mode initially, if you've purchased a key, is to make sure that everything is working on the computer, that all of your hardware is working, that the drivers for your serial port are working, got settings in correctly, and that you can get a ready for data command in green. So what I'm going to do is when to disconnect is we go to the same area for connect and just click disconnect. The lightning symbol goes away and we go back to a status of waiting for connection. Okay, I'm going to close the software and then I'm going to reopen it. And now if you're making your, let's say you're assessing which one you want to buy and you're not sure. So we can go into here and we've done our settings already, and I'm going to use the sample file that we provide with the software, but basically it's just a short Excel file that has a few rows and columns of data, and we also provide a sample profile. So I have a Michael Green here that I'm going to issue this card to. Now first and foremost, what you see is when I have the data file, I also have to have a profile, which is the card template, and based upon the data and the template, I can get this nice preview, and this preview is a virtual preview of exactly what my card is going to look like. I can enable preview and disable preview right here. The next thing is next to this is if I do want to foil top the embossed portions of this, putting the silver or the gold, colored foil on those embossed keys, I would click right here where it says enable topping. I can disable it if I do not want to do that for whatever reason. But more importantly, let's take a look right here and see what we have. So this is going to be the account number, and so you'll see that is right here, and it looks different than the text here, and that's because there's a different font selected. This is referred to the OCR font, and you will notice that it has a positioning XY coordinate. I just want to first let you know why you see what you see. Now secondly, what I want to show you, since we're in the demo mode for standard version, is when I select the font, I only have two selections. I have a standard Gothic and I have an OCR font. So that represents the Gothic is this Michael Green, the 0512, and the OCR is these numbers right here, and that's the only thing I can select. The only other option I have is turning on and off the topping. So I can emboss and then I can foil it, or I can emboss only and not foil it, foil tip it. So that would be the standard version. But maybe you say, well, I need to be able to encode a magnetic stripe on the back, or I want to be able to put little digits on the back. So you'll see that we have right here this 1, 2, 3, but there is no rear indent option in the standard mode. So let's go ahead and close. Let's reopen. And I'm going to say demo the professional. And now I'm going to open up my same sample files, and you're going to see a difference. So in the professional mode, you'll see that I have rear indent, I have this indent 7, and this MasterCard. And that's because there are 3 different types of rear indent that are optionally available within the Datacard 150Is. It'll be one of these, so if you do have a rear indenter and you select one and it's not working, chances are you need to select the other. Okay, now the other thing you'll see that we have right here is I have this track 1, track 2, track 3. Okay, the Datacard 150i has the ability to, if the magnetic encode module is installed physically and you are running the professional version here, is that you can write up to 3 tracks of data on the magnetic stripe on the rear. Say I want to add in a row, and this 0001 is what I want to put in that magnetic code, and I'm going to put that on track 1, or I'm going to put that on track 2. I can now do that. So I have rear indent, this information right here. Now I see it on the front of the card, but it's actually going to be in that position on the back. So imagine this card flipped over, and anything that's rear indent, the position is where it will be on the back. But for virtual purposes, you'll see everything on the front. Now you don't see, of course, the track data for the magnetic encoding, but this information would be put onto the magnetic stripes. We'll get into a little bit more detail about magnetic encoding. It confuses some people because it is not as straightforward as just having numbers and letters and selecting a position. There are some prerequisites to encoding. That's the main things I wanted to cover here. Standard version supports foil topping and embossing. Embossing could include the OCR or the Gothic, and then the professional version allows you to do all of that plus rear indent. And if you optionally have 1 or more rear indent fonts on your wheel, then you can select any of those, and you can also optionally, if you have the magnetic encode module, you can write 2 various tracks. We're going to go through the actual activation process right now, and I'm going to do it 2 different ways. I'm going to demonstrate both the online automatic activation, then I'll deactivate, and I will activate it for you through the manual activation method, just so that it's well understood. And I'm going to use our test activation key, which only works in our in-house environment. And so you would enter the key that you receive. Normally, doesn't matter if it has the dashes in or not. Normally, you'll probably receive it, where it'll look like this. Whether you put the dashes in or not, you'll see that it'll tell you what version you're activating. In this case, DCPrint 150i Professional. You'll notice the activation button is grayed out, and I cannot click on it. So I do need to click on I understand and agree that once activated, the software key cannot be transferred to another computer unless I first deactivate this installation. The deactivate option is located under settings. Okay, so once the key is in and I have checked the I understand, the activate button is now enabled, and so long as you're using a valid activation key that is not in use, being used on another computer, I'll click on that, and you'll get an activation succeeded. So I'll just hit OK. And so now what I see down here, instead of being in the demo mode, I do see that my product key activation is shown right here. It's in green, and I could come right back up here and click on connect because I still have all of my data cables connected up. Already had previously set the settings. So if you go in and set up your COM port settings while you're in demo mode, you do not have to do that again once you activate. I can now demonstrate for you the manual activation method. Now then you could work with a second computer or your mobile device or something to make this happen. So I'm going to go from the activate over the internet to the manual activation tab. Put the software key in. It generated what's referred to as my user ID. This is completely unique to your installation, your computer. You just click on copy to clipboard, and it's going to tell me that I succeeded, copy to clipboard successfully. From that point, next step, go to dcprint.me. That'll open up a web page, and you're just going to need to copy first your user ID into here. You'll notice that it identifies the computer, tells us about your BIOS, tells us about your processor ID, and a description of the processor type. When you're in the activation process, it takes a snapshot of your computer system, and as long as that doesn't change on the computer you're on, your activation will remain valid and it will continue to operate. Okay, once I've got my user ID in here, I will go ahead and get my key again, and I'm going to put my key in there. Check this, I understand that after I generate this license activation code, it cannot be transferred to another computer. What that means is once I use it on this computer, which is identified by this user ID showing here, is that it won't work on another computer. So let's go ahead and click on that, I now have an Activate Now enabled button. I'll click on it. Success. I get an activation code. Copy to clipboard, and I'll see right here, copy to clipboard successfully. Hit OK. Minimize that. I'll come back to the activation window. Do not close this window or change anything in it until you have copied in the activation code. So I'll click in here and right click and say paste, and I'll notice that my activate button is now enabled. As long as I haven't changed anything, I'll hit activate, and there we go. I've got my activation product key right here. I have DCPrint 150i Professional version 2 here. It retained my settings for COM3 and everything, so that's all the same. It will connect. Nothing has changed. Now let me explain one thing to you real quick about that process. Let me see here, settings, DCPrint, I'm going to deactivate. I want to highlight one thing for you here real quick. If you do need to use a separate computer, then the way you can do this after you copy to clipboard is go ahead and bring up, say, like Notepad, and you don't want it to be Word or anything like that. It needs to be a text editor or text, Notepad that just saves the raw text and there's no formatting to it. And then I could just save that as, and I could put it onto a memory card or a flash drive or something else that I can then insert into another device, whether that may be my mobile device. So I'm just going to come in here and say DCPrint in this case, and I'm going to just save that to my desktop for you to see it. There is my file. Copy that to my memory card or my flash drive so that I can take that to a different computer because this number has to be exact. Take a look how long that is. If you wanted to try to transcribe that by hand, you could, but it's so many digits, and if there's even one digit off, it's not going to work. So I take this file, transfer to a flash drive, memory card, put it into my other device, go to the website dcprint.me. I would enter in this, which the software key is fine for manually putting it in. And even if you had to come back and put that, I don't know, what is it, 16 or 24 digit activation code into here, that you can manually do. But this one you really kind of have to copy and paste it between files if for some reason you cannot get internet connectivity to do it on the computer that you're going to activate on. And reactivate, and remember once again that I'm sitting here activating, deactivating multiple times. That will not work for you, so this is all for demonstration purposes. Oh, see, here's what you would get. I'll have to go in and change this. So if you have activated it 2 different times and then attempt to do it again, it's going to come up and tell you maximum number of activations exceeded, please contact your dealer. So you have to get hold of your dealer that supplied it to you and give them an explanation as to why you have exceeded that activation number and what you were doing and what's going on, so that they can try to get a reactivation for you. Okay, we're going to go through the button functions, the features, how things are organized, and what they're for, and what these different icons mean. Starting at the top left, there is the connect button. If your data card is powered on and you have a serial port on your computer that is connected to a null modem cable, which is connected to the host port, which is the top port on your data card 150i, then when you hit connect, you will see in the bottom left status that it is ready for data command. What you will also notice is this lightning signal, and then it says disconnect, because you'll hit the same button to disconnect. Now something else you'll notice is that when it is not connected, the print preview card and execute batch are grayed out and they are not accessible. Once you have made a successful ready for data command connection, the print preview card button is enabled, as is the execute batch. Print preview is really for testing purposes or in certain circumstances where you need to create an identical card multiple times over. In prior versions, the DCPrint version 1 had a test print button over here in this area, and when you would click on it, it would print one card of the preview, and then it was done. In the print preview card in version 2, I can click on it and I can select print one or more up to 99 identical cards of the preview card. And I can change the preview by just clicking on different. So here's Frank, and then here's Michael, and here's John Smith, and so on and so forth. And if there were more rows of data, I could go through it. So the print preview card will allow me to print 1 up to 99 identical cards of the preview. Execute batch will execute the batch. So in this case, I have a batch of 4. If there were 10 rows or 20 rows, it would go through and execute until you ran out of cards, the output bin was full and required you to empty it. When you're doing the print preview or execute, during that execution or printing, it will put a stop button up here at that time. If you click on the stop, it will finish the card that it is currently doing, but then it will interrupt that batch of cards or that series of print preview cards. Okay, next is the settings, of course, is where you come in to set up the COM port, and that does need to be selected and then saved. It's also where you can deactivate the software if you're not familiar with this portion of when you would use this, because it is limited on how many times you can deactivate and reactivate. You can only do it one time. Do not do this unless you have gone over those sections and you're doing it as recommended. But so the connection settings for the COM port and the activation deactivation is all under settings, as well as the send financial password. Send financial password is, in any system that we have done, refurbished or came from us, is just Datacard all uppercase. If you see it printed as with quotations, ignore the quotations. That is just indicating the exact password. The quotes are not part of the password. So when I say Datacard and then hit send, I do need to be connected. It can't send anything, so let me show you real quick. I'll disconnect. Let me go back in here, and if I attempted to send this, it's going to tell me that the port is closed. In other words, I'm not connected. So once I'm connected, and again, this, pardon me, may not be the financial password on your system if it is not one of ours. This is generally what most technicians will reset these to after they come back from the banks or wherever they were at originally. So then we hit send, and of course financial password was sent successfully. I'll hit that real quick. The financial password is how you unlock the encoding module to be able to encode track 1, 2, and 3 data, magnetic encoding. So that's what that is for. Okay, the close button, of course, that's just going to close the software. So it does the same thing as would the X up at the top. And then the help button is going to launch the help file. The help file is going to give you screenshots and written instructions that take you everything from the installation of the software to the activation, both demo as well as using a software key that you received, as well as the manual and how to activate it, get the activation code and put it back in, as well as deactivating and the rules and limitations of it. It's going to go through on how you connect to the data card, and if you just go through this, this gives you straightforward instructions on all the buttons and how to use it, so it's very useful. Before you send us an email, go through this. It'll save you a lot of time and headache. Okay, so that would be the help button, and as we from time to time update the help file, we'll send you a replacement file for that. Okay, under card data, we can create a new document. New document just means that it's going to get rid of any data that's in here with a new one. So if I had data in here, which let's say I'm here and I want to do new, just going to delete that because I now have new. So new, and there's nothing there. And at that point, I can add columns. I can put data in, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, let's say that's what I want to use. And also bear in mind that the data card only embosses in uppercase. So if I happen to, do that, it is not going to have any lowercase. So it's better just for visual purposes, so there's no mistakes, is just use everything in uppercase. And let's say this was a member since 115, and then I got some other information. All right, and I can sit there and go through and put in, and I can come back and edit. And then I can come back and save. If this is a file I already opened and it's already existing and I hit save, then it's going to save the changes or anything else, so be careful about that. If you've made edits and you want to retain your original version, be sure to use save as so that you can save as and then name a second version or a different name and not overwrite your original file. So in this case I could say save. It allows me to save this in the standard, depending on what version of Excel that you have that you want to work with, the Microsoft Excel 97 through 2003. So if you're using Excel 97 or Office 2000 or Office 2003 or Office XP, then you probably want to use this version. If you have Office 2007, 10, 13, or the newer, they're referring to it as Office 365, then go ahead and use the XLSX, which is the Excel 2007 Renew file. And so I'm just going to call this test. It defaults wanting to save it into my documents folder. I can, just like any other software, create folders and say, I could either say that this is my data files, and you can have multiple levels of folders. So I could have a client name here. Let's say I've got Acme. I'm doing this as a service for Acme Janitorial. You know, I'm doing ID cards or something for them. And then I probably want to name this. You know, maybe this is a employee ID. Let's say that's what it was. All right. So I've saved that. Then let's say I make a change to this and all right, so, but I don't want to overwrite the original file. So I could hit save as in this case, and I could save it over top of the employee ID, or let's say I want to do employee ID 2, or just test, whatever, so that I have more than one file. So now the other nice thing about this is I can hit open. That will take me into my documents folder, into the last folder opened. So this is the file that we provide, which we refer to as the sample XLS. But anything that I created then, now I'll see that there's the two files that I've created, and I can open either one, and there it is. And then of course, once it's there, I can add columns, I can delete columns by so what we have is the new document, open, and this is what we would call the recent files, so that if I have recently opened a file, it will give me a little menu, so I don't have to go through all of here and then drill through all these folders and stuff. I can just go through that recent list. I can save the file. I can save as the file. I can add columns. So, I need more information, and I'm going to put here that this is let's see, level 2. Security level or supervisory level, whatever. Now I can also delete a column. Now deleting the column, when I do that, is that I would hit the delete button. You notice how that stays there, and now I would come and say, well, I don't want this column, so I'm going to click on the column that I want to get rid of. Now I have to do that for each time that I want to do it. It also, I can order my files by clicking on these. When I did that, it went top down instead of bottom up, so I can click on that. But now that column that I just put in is gone. Let's also say that I wanted to get rid of this row. Let's say I have 10 rows and I got a row here I don't want. I can just say delete that row, and then I can click oh, I'm on delete column, apologize. I can just click on it again and turn it off. If I'm here, I want to delete the row, so I will come here and say delete the row, and it will delete that row. If I highlight this row, I delete that row, and I'm back basically to just a blank 4 column. So I can add columns, I can delete columns, I can add rows. The way I add rows is just, once I get to the end and go to the next one. You can't have all blanks and make a new row, but once I've entered any data into these columns or into this row and then hit the tab, it will take me to the next row, and I can go back and edit any of those cells and then save or save as, and then I can delete any of those rows. So I'm going to delete the row, I'm going to delete the row. Let me just go back to my sample. Alright, much in the same way as the data, we can do the same thing with the profiles. Now, I can create a totally custom profile, and the way I do that is the order that the data is in is the order that it will pull over into my profile. And the way I pull data over is just say to add a row. When I add a row, it pulls in the first column. If I click the green button again, add a row, pulls in the second column, and the third, the fourth, in this case the fifth. I then get to select a font. Okay, so my font, it's an account number, I want that. This I want to be standard Gothic. And you'll notice all this stuff is located down here, so we're going to get to that because you've got to give everything an X and a Y coordinate. So for instance, let's show you real quick. Now I'm just typing it in and then hitting the tab key to advance to the next one. And I'm using a left column coming from the left over 10 spaces, so I'm moving over from X10. And then I'm hitting my tab button. That'll take me to the Y coordinates, and I'm going to put this at 7.5. I'm going to put this is at 10, and I'm going to put this at, say, 15. No, got these backwards. I'm going to put this at 7.5, and I'm going to put this at 15, and this I want to be rear indented. So depending on the rear indent font that I have, most of them that ship from us, if you did receive it from emboss.cards, would be MasterCard, but it is possible that you have one or more or different fonts, so it would be rear indent or MasterCard. So whichever you have, you'll put it there. And so I'm going to say I'm going to put that over 70 spaces and up 30. And of course, when it's rear indenting, this isn't going to happen right above this. It's going to be on the back side of the card. So imagine this flipped over, and then on the back side, that being there. Okay, and then this last data I was going to put on track 1. I'm going to encode that, or maybe I want it on track 2. Okay, so now here's my sample. So now I can save this. I want to save it. And if this is for, in this case, I created an Acme janitorial. Let's pretend that that's what it was. Employee ID profile. That's what we refer to the card profiles. It would be the template. Okay. It has the ability to delete rows. So if the thing to understand when you delete a row is I cannot select this and then delete it. It will delete in order that it came in. So hitting the add row pulls in number 1, then pulls in number 2, then pulls in number 3, then 4, and so on. And when I hit the delete, it's going to delete the last. So last in will be the first deleted. So here, because it doesn't matter if I select here and then hit delete, it's still there. Okay. Next would be new profile. So I've already saved this, so I'm going to say yeah, new profile. I can start all over again, adding rows and building it up exactly how I want it, putting all that in. Let me go back to where I had, since I already had all that in. Now, we have the same save and save profile, and we also have the, clicking on this little down arrow, the recent list, so that I don't have to drill through all of the folders and the dialogues. I can go right to a recent file. Okay, next to that is the enable topping. That turns on the foil tipping. If you don't want the silver, the gold, whatever foil you're using to be topped onto the embossing, then I can turn that off. If I do, then I turn it on. Now there's a caveat to this. The Datacard 150i was designed to emboss and foil tip the bottom half of the front side of the card. So let us say that I wanted this to be up at 32. Okay? And or even let's say I wanted it up at 45. I wanted something up high. I think 40 is the highest you can go. Okay, but what happens is if I tried to emboss this with enable topping on, is it's going to fail. I'm going to get an error, and the reason for it is that the topper only has physical capacity to do from 24 and down. So if I'm going to have a Y coordinate greater than 24, I have to turn off topping. And you don't have a choice on that because that is physically a limitation to the Datacard 150i. So you can emboss and foil tip anything up to a Y coordinate of 24, and you may not top or tip anything above 24, but you can emboss above 24 and get much higher. You can do about 2/3 or 3/4 of the entire card. You can't do the very top because that's where the gripper is holding the card. Okay, and then of course you have the enable preview. Not sure why you would want to get rid of it, but if you did, that's what this is for. All right, let's come back over to the data. Now that we've gone through and you have a brief understanding of the layout, I want to show you some of the more advanced features beyond just editing the cells directly. Occasionally what you'll find is for instance, I have 5 rows of data and I only need to use 3 or 4 of them, but they're not in the order. Because remember, I can't delete out, let's say I wanted to get rid of the 512. I don't need that, I don't want it on the card, and I can't just, turn it off. And so what do? Well, there's a couple different things you can do. First and easiest is just you could delete it out of this file. So I could say delete the column and delete that. So delete. Okay, let me reorder that or do it by here. And now that's not there, so now I see over here that I no longer have that 512, and that's there. There's another option, and then I could save this file as an amended file, an alternate file that I don't save over my original, or I could save it over my original if I wanted to. But let me bring back the sample file, and let's say I want to get rid of that. I can also drag and drop. So I can click on the column, and then let's just drag it over to the end. And now I see right now I don't have the date in there, 512, because remember, the card profiles come in the first column, then the second, and the third. So even though you see these 1 and then 2s over here, it doesn't follow that numerical order. These numbers are the labels for the original column order, not the order that they will be pulled in over here. It will pull in the first physical column, the second physical column, the third physical column, and I can change up. Now I can see Michael Green is down here. Now it changes the order for the data, but it does not change the order. So right now it looks like it's wanting to track to magnetic encode Michael Green. So these parts here stay consistent, and you would have to manually go back and tell, if Michael Green is supposed to be, embossed, and do I want this to be, oh, that's not the rear indent, so I'm going to put this the rear indent. Oh, and this is the track 1 magnetic. Normally what we recommend is that, whatever you're going to do, put your magnetic encoding at the tail end for purposes of a standard method of how you would do it and keep things organized. Alright, so we can drag and drop the columns, we can add columns, we can delete columns, we can edit the cells directly, we can add rows in here so that if I wanted to add a new row of data, I can do that. If I click on the column heads, it will reorder, either ascending or descending based upon that column's values. So I can, as I was saying, add the columns, delete the columns. I can add rows based upon entering in a new row that way, and then I can also reorder them through the drag and drop. I can save over the existing file, save as a new file. I can open directly through the standard interface dialog box that way. I can go to my short list of files that have been recently opened. If my file has been saved, now the one thing you need to be, if you haven't saved this and I click on new document, it will just delete that, and it isn't going to ask you, do you want to save? So be sure that as you go through that you either you either save or save as before you get too far down the road and then find out you lost something. Okay, over here these cannot be dragged and dropped or changed other than to select the font, to select the XY coordinates, but these will always follow in order of the physical columns. I'm going to touch on magnetic encoding just briefly because we do get support requests for it, and so I want to differentiate between capacity or capability and your prerequisite level of knowledge necessary to successfully magnetic encode. Is that the magnetic encoding cannot raw encode. What does that mean? Raw encode would mean that I could put in Sally or Mary Had a Little Lamb or anything that I want, which is called raw data, and stick that data onto the magnetic stripe. The Datacard 150i was designed specifically for financial institutions, banks, things like that. And as such, they are always encoding debit cards, ATM cards, and various financial cards, and there's a very strict format in which that data had to be encoded onto the magnetic stripe so that it would be compliant with the standards that financial cards use, whether they were using them at a merchant's checkout and swiping their card, or they were using the pay at the pump, or they're using an ATM machine. So there is an ISO standard, it's called Format B, which is the banking format, in which the data must be formatted, and that has to do with what characters are valid, length of fields, field indicators, and then per track that is different. And so when you're going to use the magnetic encoder on the Datacard 150i, you're going to have to mirror putting your data in a similar fashion. So it can have, you know, membership numbers or account numbers, it can have names and expirations or member cents and stuff, but it's going to have to be encoded in a manner that is similar to the way financial cards put that information on for financial card purposes. If that won't match, then you won't want to use the encoder from the data card. You'll want to get an MSR 605 or some other encoder, or have an encoder on your card printer or something, so that you can encode raw data, meaning that it has no standards. It doesn't require, you know, being put into a particular format, that you can match any format or method that you want. And then secondly, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you plan with the end intent in mind first and work your way back. If you're doing this as a service for customers, you know, if it's a tanning salon or it's a membership or whatever else, you need to make sure that you understand fully what the format that they need in their swipe machine, what does it have to receive on that swipe. Because if you just put anything on there, then it's going to be like gobbledygook to the input software or device, and it's not going to be able to read it. And so we suggest that people should also have an MSR 605 or some other manual encoder, so that you can manually encode cards, test it on their system, so that you determine the format that it needs to be in that successfully will swipe and scan on their systems for their purposes, and then determine, is the Datacard 150i able to encode in that format because it mirrors the Format B, you know, financial card format, or it needs something else. And if it needs something else, you'll use your manual encoder, or you'll use your printer's encoder, or some other method. So the right tool for the job. Now, that being said, the financial password, when you first open the software, send the financial password. While you have the software open in this session, you won't need to do it again. Once you close the software and then reopen the software or reboot your computer, you will need to send the financial password again. Remember that the financial password was all uppercase. Datacard, if it is our system, or most technicians that have reset a system. But if it's not that, I couldn't tell you what it is necessarily. You'll need to get a technician to either reset it or take it in for service or something, so that can be reset, because not sending the financial password will limit your ability to encode. I think you can only encode to track 2, I believe, in limited capacity, and you will not be able to write to track 1 or 3. Okay, and then of course in sending the financial password, you do need to be connected with the ready for data command. Alright, so we don't do training on this because there's an infinite number of amounts of data that you may or may not want to encode for an infinite number of purposes and outputs or something. So the only thing we can do is tell you that we do provide hardware with the magnetic module, encoding module. We do have the software that in the professional version, it has the capacity, the capability to send the data and the financial password to the data card, but the data card itself, the firmware built into the data card that runs, that you see, you know, the LCD that powers the LCD and everything else, it goes through a verification process that when that magnetic encode data comes in, the firmware on the Datacard 150i will review it and determine if it complies with that Format B, that ISO standard Format B banking financial institution format that would be valid. And if it's not valid or deems it's not valid, it'll error it and kick it out, and it won't successfully do it. So it isn't that the software didn't work, it isn't that the hardware didn't work, it is that you have not formatted the data correctly, or you have not sent the financial password, or all of the above. And then, of course, at times your magnetic encoder may need to be cleaned, adjusted, calibrated, or something else to make sure that it's set up. And then last but not least is the coercivity. On the back of these cards, you will see a stripe, and there are two-track cards and there are three-track cards. The two-track cards tend to be a slimmer stripe. The three-track are a little fatter. Then you have what's called high coercivity and low coercivity, also referred to as HICO and LOCO. LOCO tends to be more of a brown color, could be a dark brown, and the HICO cards tend to be a black. And high coercivity means it takes a higher voltage to encode to it and to read from it, and the low coercivity is a lower voltage that would read to it. So your data card has to be set up in its settings to match the card that you're going to use, whether you're using high coercivity, HICO, or low coercivity, LOCO. So those are all of the things you have to be aware of and match up and comply with the Format B ISO standards for the banking card standards, and then you need to send the financial password to a matching card to a machine that has the magnetic encoder that is in good working order. We can provide general information, certain documentation information about it. If you need additional, you want training, we can provide that to you, but it would be as a professional service fee, or if you wanted us to set you up and create templates, we can do that as well, where you can say, okay, here's some samples that we want, can you create a template for us, send it to us in an Excel spreadsheet for this particular purpose, and we can do that for a fee as well. If you have questions, be sure that you can just text us, message us, email us, and we will attempt in any way we can to assist you.
Okay, I want to do a quick overview on connecting your cabling to the Datacard 150i. We get some people that are confused because, as you'll see back here, there are actually two different ports. First, what I want to cover is, and hopefully this is in, but you do need what is referred to as a null modem cable, not a standard serial cable. Now, they may look very similar, and they have the same pinning and everything, but a null modem cable has inverted pairing inside. It is not a standard serial cable. It would be considered a serial crossover, which would be null, so meaning that the pairing is reversed. So if you try to use a serial cable and connect to the data card to your computer, it will not work. It will not connect. Alright, so the port that you're going to use is the top port here, and the label for them, if you look, there's a label under these, and it's called the host port. So it's the top port or the host port. And you'll notice on your cable, on your null modem, it'll be, maybe I'm not there, it'll be this connector, and then you can just slide that on. Okay, now this end will be what goes to your serial port on the computer. And if you don't have a built-in serial port, and do not confuse, some computers have a VGA port that looks a little bit like this, that would be for an external monitor. Computers manufactured in the last 7 years usually do not have a serial port, and you will either need to get an older model computer, like some of the Dell Latitudes and some of the ThinkPads IBM had and stuff. But if not, you can get a USB to serial adapter, plug that into your USB port, and then it will have a serial port that can connect into this null port. So we are going to use a serial port on the computer, and then we're going to use the null cable to plug into the serial port, whether it's built into your computer or whether you're using the USB to serial adapter. So, two things. Use the disk to install the drivers. And if you want one that's most likely going to be plug-and-play universal on Windows, we suggest the TrendNet TUS9. And it comes with a disk in case you do have any issues with the drivers. But this one, normally you plug it in, and within a minute or two, it's up and running and runs flawlessly. All right, so with that said, here is the TrendNet TUS9 out of the package. So your computer won't have a serial port most of the time, especially if it's more recent than the last 5 or 6, 7 years. And so you'll just plug that into your USB, and that will give you your serial adapter end. As I explained previously, you'll need a null modem cable. That null modem cable then just connects right here. It does allow you to even lock that down using little screw pins, so that you make sure that you keep a good connection that doesn't become dislodged or disconnected. And you can do the same back here on your data card. You can just screw that in, and then there's no questions about whether or not it might accidentally come loose.
Okay, really quickly, we're going to take a look at the boot up sequence and what needs to happen for you to connect to your data card with the software through the COM port, serial port, null modem cable. So I'm going to actually cycle this off. I'm going to wait it's always a good idea to wait at least 10 or 15 seconds. Don't just immediately turn it on and off. You can blow a fuse or something. We also do recommend that you run a quality surge suppressor at the absolute minimum, and ideally you would use an AVR, which is an active voltage regulator or an automatic voltage regulator, but it does need to be active, not passive. And what that does is that all inbound power goes through its transformer and is output at a steady constant voltage rate, and that if, let's say, the power is kind of fluctuating a little bit, it goes from 100 volts to 104 to 102 to 108, kind of has a little wave to it, what we might refer to as harmonic distortion. It takes all of that and steps it up and down so that you get a consistent, for instance, 110 volt steady power that is put into your machine, which is important because these have about 8 different motors that are stepper motors. Stepper motors are timing motors, and timing motors rely a specific set of voltage to turn at a specific rate, which is how it knows how far to move for how long. The LED is just flashing, it's a standard. Okay, CPX, see that 150i CPX. CPX mode is necessary for DCPrint to be able to connect. CPX or CPX/DES. But if it is in DES only or any other thing other than CPX or CPX/DES, it will not be able to connect because either it is in the wrong protocol, meaning that our software won't be speaking in the correct language or protocol, or the machine will be in an encrypted mode to where it requires encrypted communications. So we'll have a separate portion where we talk about how you can get your machine into CPX or CPX/DES mode so that you can connect there as well. So let's go through this. You have to have a no modem cable, not a serial cable, that connects to a serial port, which can be built in, or it can be a USB to serial adapter. That serial adapter, if is USB, needs to be installed with the drivers that come on the disk from the manufacturer, or if you want to plug and play one that works almost 100% of the time on every system, we do recommend the TrendNet TU-S9. All right.